Welcome to the Explainer. So today we're going to tackle the German army in World War II, but we're going to do it through a really unique lens, a 1973 German Army handbook. We're going to use its surprisingly blunt analysis to peel back the layers of that powerful myth, the unstoppable war machine, and get to the much more complicated reality underneath. Let's dive in. When you picture the German army of 1939, what's the first thing that pops into your head? For most of us, it's that iconic image, right? A sleek, perfectly oiled, unstoppable machine, a fully mechanized force of tanks and infantry just rolling across Europe. This was the whole terrifying idea behind the Blitzkrieg, or Lightning War. And this is the image they projected to the world. This illustration, taken right from the handbook, shows these elite troops in advanced camo, and it just perfectly captures that legend. It's an image of pure power, of modernity. And it built this fearsome reputation that, as the handbook points out, often demoralized their opponents before a shot was even fired. But here's the thing. Right in the introduction, the author, W.J.K. Davies, gives us a major reality check. He flat out calls this powerful image a propaganda myth that worked. So, okay, if the all-conquering, fully mechanized army was a myth, what was the reality? Well, this is where it gets really fascinating. The handbook reveals that the German Wehrmacht wasn't one single unified force. It was actually two profoundly different armies fighting the same war, often right next to each other, but moving at completely different speeds. On one hand, you absolutely had the tip of the spear, the elite, fully motorized Panzer and Panzergrenadier divisions. These were the fast, hard-hitting units that made the Blitzkrieg happen and created that whole legend in the first place. But behind that modern, high-tech vanguard was the vast majority of the army, the infantry divisions. And how did they get around? Horses. Yeah, you heard that right. The handbook makes it crystal clear that most of the army depended on horse-drawn wagons for supplies and artillery, a technology that hadn't changed much in hundreds of years. I mean, get this. The army that invaded Russia in 1941 used more horses than Napoleon did back in 1812. So you have to ask, why this weird split? Why the high-tech and the 19th century? It really boils down to a massive, fundamental weakness that plagued the German war effort from the very beginning. Its industrial base just could not keep up with what its military planners dreamed of. And the scale of this problem was just staggering. The original Grand Plan, it called for 63 fully equipped Panzer divisions. 63. But by the end of 1939, when the war kicked off, you know how many they actually had? 10. Just 10. That is an enormous gap between ambition and reality. So, what do you do when you have this chronic lack of proper equipment? Well, you get creative. The army was constantly forced to improvise, pushing obsolete tanks, captured enemy vehicles, and even just regular civilian trucks into frontline service, all to just keep things moving. And this image right here illustrates that point perfectly. I mean, what you're looking at is a heavy infantry gun literally bolted onto the chassis of an old, obsolete Panzer tank. These weren't some clever factory designs, no. They were makeshift, battlefield solutions created out of pure desperation because the right equipment just wasn't there in the numbers they needed. Now, they did try to fix this. There was something called the Shell program that tried to standardize all the vehicle types to make maintenance a little easier. But even after they slashed the number of different models, they still had to grab civilian vehicles to fill the gaps. The result was a total logistical nightmare. I mean, just imagine you're a mechanic in the middle of Russia, trying to find spare parts for dozens of different French, Czech, and German truck models, all in the same unit. It was chaos. And this industrial chaos wasn't the only problem. The regular army's strength was also being systematically weakened from the inside, thanks to political interference and the rise of what the handbook calls private armies. And the most famous and most powerful of these was the Waffen-SS. This wasn't just another part of the military. It was the Nazi Party's very own armed force. And it eventually grew so big it could rival the regular army. And from about 1943 onward, this parallel army got top priority. It systematically siphoned off all the best new equipment, the most motivated recruits, and the most reliable supplies, leaving the regular army to basically make do with the leftovers. Meanwhile, at the very top, the command structure itself was just breaking down. After 1941, Hitler became the army's direct commander, and he started bypassing his own experienced general staff more and more. He would give these direct and often totally disastrous orders straight to frontline units. This made any kind of smart, strategic withdrawal or flexible defense almost impossible. Okay, so let's just step back for a second. We've got an army that's crippled by industrial problems, logistical chaos, and political infighting. So the question is, how on earth did it manage to fight so effectively for so long against a coalition of the world's biggest industrial powers? Well, the handbook gives us 3 key reasons. First, while they could never produce enough of it, the equipment they did design was often excellent. When weapons like the Panther tank or the POC-43 anti-tank gun first showed up, they were frequently superior in pretty much every way to what the Allies had. Second, and this one was a real shock to Allied planners, was the quality of German leadership at the lower levels. Contrary to that stereotype of the unthinking soldier just following orders, the average junior officer in NCO showed this incredible flexibility and initiative. They could adapt on the fly without waiting for someone to tell them what to do. And finally, the handbook credits the sheer toughness and efficiency of the average German soldier. It was their resilience, their training, and their ability to just keep fighting under the most appalling conditions that ultimately held this whole flawed machine together for nearly 6 years. And this really leaves us with the central paradox of the German war machine, doesn't it? You have an army that was often brilliant on a tactical level, winning individual battles with incredible skill and courage, but was ultimately doomed by a flawed grand strategy, a crippled industrial base, and a totally dysfunctional high command. It's a powerful lesson on how winning battles alone just doesn't win wars.